Hello and welcome, everyone. This is the November Veterans Day edition of the Elementary ELA Accessing Georgia Milestones webinar. And I'm glad you've decided to watch this recording or join us live. Let me give you just a brief background on what these webinars are intended to do. In each month, we are exploring resources, including sample questions like those that we know the students will encounter in their second generation assessments, the Georgia Milestones. And so every month we have a webinar such as this, and we'll go ahead and get started. The resources used in this presentation include archived Department of Education webinars, some constructed response trainings that we've done here at West Georgia RESA, and external prototype sites like those from different states in the U.S. who have departments of education who are sharing resources for tests like our Georgia Milestones. I want to show you this link here at tinyurl.com/GA Milestones ELA. If you click that, it will, or type that in, it will take you to this page, and this page simply has the recordings and the PowerPoints for previous sessions. We had one in September and one in October for elementary. And then it also includes some quick links to some important Department of Education sites, such as the Milestones End of Grade content weights and the overall Georgia Milestones Assessment System homepage for the DOE. They've started a very good series of PowerPoint webinars that they've entitled Eliciting Evidence of Student Learning, and I recommend that you watch those. This is a quick link to get to there. PowerPoints. Also, clicking here will take you to some of our upcoming courses, including those that may very well be aligned with differentiation or other best practices that support students in these tests. Also, in the DOE's Eliciting Evidence of Student Learning webinars, they mentioned in their resources a number of crucial books and or articles that they were using, and so I found where they live online, and if you want to see them, you can click them here. Okay, over here on the right you will see these are the main external resources that have been pointed out by the DOE to be useful for us in getting a sense of what the Georgia milestones may be like. So our test will not be exactly like Delaware's or Kentucky's or New York's or Louisiana's, etc. However, we do know enough about the second generation milestone test that is being designed. We know enough about it right now to know that it would be very similar to the kinds of rigorous sample questions we have here. Okay, so going back to the PowerPoint for a moment. Each of our webinars begins similarly because I want to set a similar foundation. However, if you are someone listening to each month's webinar, I don't want you to have to hear everything that was said at the beginning in October and September over again. So I'm going to do it as quickly as I can and get us right to the meat. A reminder of these are the resources. Here's our learning targets. We do want to build our own capacity to introduce students to the expectations and then figure out what do we have to do next, because each and every one of us has something different perhaps that we need to do next in order to continue to prepare students for these milestone tests. This is a reminder to go to the Learning Webinar series that I showed you the link of. Here's some topics for that they have in that DOE series. Also, here's a great definition for assessment for learning, and that's what we're actually doing here. We're taking assessment information, an assessment focus, an assessment interest, assessment resources, but using them for the purpose of teaching and learning in the classroom. So assessment for learning involves teachers making adjustments to teaching and learning in response to assessment evidence. So these activities and resources that I'll point out for you are great to great resources to be used in the classroom in order to get a sense of where students are in their mastery of these kind of skills, and therefore to help you with your formative assessment and your continued instructional planning. So we know we're going to have constructed response questions. We know that there are many reasons why we need to do that. Federal requirements as well as just new changes in our assessment system. But mostly we need to do this because this will set our students up for college and career readiness. This is just a data slide to give you an indication of some of the compelling reasons why we moved to a more rigorous assessment. And this is a chart from the DOE showing an earlier pilot summary of these kinds of questions to Georgia students, and across the grade bands, students did very poorly. And so here's the question: why do we think students do poorly on constructed response questions? Well, some of the students did not answer the question. They wrote something else perhaps, but it wasn't the question. Some students wrote what they felt was sufficient, but we saw it to be, we, like anyone who might evaluate it, saw it as shallow and in need of more details. Some students simply got off topic. Others might have had handwriting issues, but a lot of them didn't understand what the question was asking. In fact, one of the most frequent answers was IDK, or I don't know what you're asking me. So there are many reasons, but mostly students are just not in this habit. They are in the habit of spotting a correct answer as it lays there. They are not in the habit of digging for, of excavating for, and then building with the details of a prompt in order to construct an answer. They're just in the habit of selecting. So it's a difference between the higher order verb of generating versus selecting, which is, of course, not as higher order. These constructive response questions are going to require students to apply their knowledge, skills, and critical thinking. And we need to get students used to the idea that these questions will have more than one way to approach a correct answer. And that's a new thought for some students. It will require students to start with nothing and then to construct in these constructed response questions. So we need to get them used to the fact that there's no benefit of suggestions or choices in this kind of a question. We know that the Georgia Milestones test itself in grades 3 through 11 are going to have some multiple choice. So we haven't entirely left the effectiveness of multiple and the convenience of multiple choice questions. But we'll also have constructed response in ELA and mathematics, extended response, and technology enhanced questions. Now, the technology enhanced or enabled questions, that simply means that the delivery method of the test for the Georgia Milestones will eventually be 100% online. In this 2014-15 school year, it is anticipated that 30% of the students will take the test online. And although adults sometimes get very concerned about all of the issues of online testing, we do have research to support that students perform better, that Georgia students perform better overall when they take the test online. A lot of folks have asked a great question: what's the difference between constructed response and extended response? It's simply the length. There's no other difference. Extended response questions will be titled extended response, and there will be an explanation in the prompt as to what kind of length the response is calling for. We know that we're going to still have criterion referenced questions, just like we're used to from the CRCT, but we're also going to have some norm referenced questions. And in case it's been a while since you've worked with those terms directly, the norm reference questions are going to provide us with data on the comparison of a student's performance to others. And there will also be some embedded field test items. And it's hard for students to get used to, so we need to go ahead and tell them that there will be questions that are simply being field tested and they're not being used to calculate their score. But some students might be thrown by them a little bit because they may not look familiar, and the content of what is being asked might be a new sort of thing for them to see. So we can prepare students for that and let them know that those kind of questions are coming. And also on the test, we've been told that it will say something to the effect of, you may not have seen questions like, the following ones before, but simply do your best is what it'll say. So we know that we've made a big switch in Georgia from selected, isolated writing assessments at grades 3, 5, 8, and 11 to a fully integrated reading and writing, speaking, listening, and research-based test for all of our grades. The rubrics for these writings are going to be largely holistic, which means that the entire response will be considered in multiple ways for multiple aspects, but then will result in a score, rather than the kind of rubric that we've had in the past with our writing, that had descriptors where you might get a 4 in style but a 0 in conventions. With these constructed response questions in ELA, the rubric will be like a holistic one like you see here. Okay, so this slide is an acronym that Dawn Bennett here at West Georgia RESA has been using, and a lot of teachers are finding that it's very useful. Hope it's useful for you as well. This is an acronym RACE to remind students in constructed response questions to reword or restate the question, to provide an initial answer, to then cite evidence from the text in support of that answer, and then to do the step that a lot of students skip, which is to explain the connection between the answer and the citation, to explain how the evidence supports your answer. So this kind of acronym is a useful reminder to them. This is a possible response organizer that may give students a place to organize their thoughts. Here's where you would put the initial question or prompt, and here's where you would restate it in your own words. Here's your very simple answer that you're inclined to make at the start, and then here is what you've come up with when you've gone back into the text with your shovel to dig for details that would connect to your answer, and then an explanation for the reader about how all of that is connected. This is the same acronym in a different graphic organizer look, and at the top it says athletes work hard in a race. Let's work hard in this race. And I just put that little title on there because I wanted to reinforce the notion that we don't mean race as in hurry up, try to finish before others. We mean race as in do your best, work hard. This is the time when you put forth your best effort. So, the first step of rewording the question, restating the question, there are some students who need practice with that. And any text or any scenario can be used for this. Why were the 3 bears so upset when they came home? How do you turn that around to restate the question? They were upset when they came home because. You can ask students to come up with their own question and then share it with a partner. So my question might be, what did you do last night? And then the response from my partner would be, last night I ... so that they can get a sense of how to quickly reword and restate any question into a start for their response. Now, we are certainly differentiating for students. And so for more capable writers, it would be appropriate to discuss how introductions might be more creative than that. But for some students, it's a really good place to start. Also, we want students to get used to this idea that there are a lot of bonus words that if they will simply work them into their the response, then they will be reminded to speak to certain aspects of the prompt. Because, by, when, if, until. Let me go quickly to this slide. Yeah, here's another example of some words and or phrases that students can come to know as likely participants in a writing prompt. If you took a lot of student work samples, you'd probably find in many of them these words. It says, an example is, the author wrote in the text, according to the text. It would be useful for the teacher to lead students into a discussion of what some of these words and phrases are, maybe to gather together to make a class poster. And it's really also very useful for that student who says to you, I'm finished, and maybe they just think they're finished and have not really responded thoroughly. It's useful then to say, well, go back and look at the poster. Are there any of those sentence starters that you could work in to your writing? It's just to remind students of like the next step, perhaps. Constructed response questions, I like to think of it as like in this metaphor of construction, and to remind students that in constructed response, you cannot build without materials. And you have to go get your materials. They're not going to be handed to you. And where do you find them? You find them in the text. You find them in the passage, in the poem, in the story, whatever it is that you were asked to read before you were responding in writing. And so how do you break that material up? Well, you want the students to be able to pick out individual points of evidence. And of course, that takes practice. But you can teach students that the constructed response requires a first step of looking, almost like taking inventory. What do we have here? What kind of materials do we have here? What kind of evidence do we have here? Okay, so now, here we are, finally. Let's look at 2 sample assessment questions, and these come from the Louisiana collection. I've chosen a grade 5 segment called Rainbows and a grade 4 segment called The Final Laugh. And the link is here, but I want to show you also that if you're back on this main page, Louisiana is one of the ones suggested for us to take a look at. So when you click on it, it takes you to this matrix of all of their practice tests. And it shows you the actual test you can download. You can also download the alignment, which is like a standard by standard explanation of how the test aligns with the standard. And then also for some of the prompts, there are student work samples. Okay, and this is also a very useful site for mathematics as well. So I'm going to go back now to here. When I clicked on the grade 5 alignment chart and scrolled down, I saw that there was a passage called Rainbows. And in it, the students were answering a number of questions that related to these particular standards. The reason why I chose Rainbows is because I wanted to focus on inferences for a moment. And this particular passage does align to the standard of drawing inferences from a text. And so here's a passage that students read about rainbows and a rainbow experiment. And then this is an informational text that they've been presented with. There is like a to-do list, like in instructions, and then an explanation. And so the students have these 2 pages worth of information to read. Then there are questions, which statement best compares, what does this word in context likely mean? We're used to all those kinds of questions. But I wanted to draw our attention to question number 27. If the author added an illustration, which picture would best support the description of the experiment? The students have to use the details from the text about the experiment and how it went the first time in order to infer what would happen this second time in each of these little illustrations. Yeah. So also in grade 4, the same testing group at Louisiana and their resources, there was a poem called The Final Laugh, and it also aligned to drawing inferences from a text and describing characters. And of course, it aligns, as you can see, to many other standards. I just wanted to share that the reason why I chose it today as one to take a look at was because I wanted to focus on inferences. So drawing inferences from a text, drawing inferences from a text here as well. So we've got two instances within that passage and within that section that do align to making inferences. So this slide, I hope, is very useful. This is just a quick reminder of what teachers can do with these items that we get from other resources and the student work samples that might come with them. Well, one thing we can do is simply work them full group and have an entire shared experience as a class, talking through it, thinking about it, answering questions about it, and perhaps generating an excellent class response. What that would accomplish would be added exposure to questions like this, and also an experience of success for that student to have in their memory, so that when they are working independently and come to a question like this, at least they can think back on a time when, as a full group, they were successful with it. Well, of course, you can do other things as well. You can talk about it full group, but then have students work in small group, and you can facilitate some collaboration before they start their independence. Or you could simply go straight for the independence and give this as a benchmark, so to speak. Just give it to the students and see what they do with it. And I realize we don't have a lot of time to grade a lot of stuff, but if we simply gave it as a benchmark and then just made 2 piles as we're just looking at it, these are the kids who are able to do it. These are the kids who are not. These are the kids in this stack that I'm not so worried about right now. These are the kids who need more help with inference, etc. Some of these do come with student work samples, or when the students take it as a small group or benchmark, they are then generating student work samples. And one thing that's very useful as a teaching activity in the classroom is to have students compare different student work samples and talk about which one was more successful and why, and then to infer from that the qualities of an excellent response. And of course, this can be done small group and then brought together with the full group. It's also very helpful to give students a sample that has a real sample from a student, and then ask them to add or edit it. For differentiation, you can give several student work samples to some students that have only a very subtle difference in the mastery or success, and have them find and talk about those small differences. Another thing you could do is have the students get a student work sample and then write the test taker a note, the pretend test taker, whoever wrote this, tell them what they did well, tell them what they might do next time. Okay, so this is a screenshot from the practice test for grade 4, the final laugh, and this is the one that was heavily focused on inference. And the poem's provided, the students read the poem, and then they answer some construction multiple choice questions, and then they get to question 5, And that is a strong inference question, as well as question 7, where the students have to explain how this poem is similar to a story. So again, those are 2 practice items from the Louisiana section. Also wanted to share that there are a number of teaching and learning resources for inference. I imagine you have lots and lots of them as well. But one that I wanted to point out to you was the actual corestandards.org ELA literacy standards at corestandards.org. If you go to the standards page and then click on Appendix B. Appendix B is that part of the core standards document that provides select text exemplars. These are some suggested text and performance tasks for grade bands. So for example, when I scroll down to 4th and 5th grade text exemplars, then I see that there is a passage from The Secret Garden, and there is an inference performance task there for them. So the students could be given this performance task as well as the section itself, and they can work their inference section there as well. Also, there's an interactive game here. This is a practicing inferences detective game. Students read very short, like 1 or 2 sentence passages, and then answer a direct inference question. And also, a lot of students have learned and used this inference song. It's a really great song, goes to the tune of My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. Here is a link to a class singing it with a Spider-Man sort of like puppet in the front. And the words to this song really are very useful. This is to My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. It talks about being a good book detective and filling in what's not in the book. And I think that is key to inference, of course. I think one thing that keeps students from answering inference questions correctly is that some students still think that the words that they write in response to a text must have been the words that they were given in the text. And so it's very freeing for them to learn that you're going to use words to answer it that are your words. They're you got them from the ideas in the text. I encourage you to check out the DOE webinars as well about eliciting evidence, as well as continued work with practice questions. The DOE has created a site, Experience Georgia testing, at learnoas.ctb.com/Georgia, and this is an online experience for what the new test would look like, so that we can get a sense of the format of it. There are demonstration tests here that are very useful, and for English, math, science, and social studies. I'll just click on English Language Arts Practice. It is very good for the students to see that what it would look like. And you're simply radio buttoning. If I change my mind, I can go like that. To go on, I go like this. At the bottom, there's like a little measure of how far I've gone in the test and how much further I have to go. And I'm just going to quickly take us to an example like this. This is a longer passage, and so students would have to know to scroll to read it all. And then I'll give another radio button there and one here because I want to get us quickly to a place where there is a blank. All right, this is where the students would type their answer. And we can see that when you keep typing, it keeps growing, the box keeps growing with you. So students will not or should not feel like they're being limited in what they can write, because the box will grow with their answer. Okay. Thanks again for joining us. I know you have so many resources, but I'm glad that you could find these useful. I would like for you to feel free to evaluate this session to help us learn what we've done well here that's useful, what we might do next time that would be more useful. And if you have ideas for that, feel free to email me, or if you'd like to fill out a survey, there's the survey link for my professional learning webinars. And thanks again. Have a great Veterans Day.